Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends.
Here in episode 109, we welcome Ken North. He's one of NACFE's emerging technologies consultants, where he talks with me about the curveball from his youth that changed his career plans and led him back to trucking. We also talked about the value of relationships in the trucking industry and why he has joined NACFE. He also comments on what's special about the trucking industry, the role of efficiency in logistics and transportation for economic survival, and what technologies intrigue him. And he talks about his connection to the pioneers founding America. Hello, and welcome to this episode of my podcast series. I'm really excited to have joining us today Ken North. Ken has joined NACFE, and he's our emerging technologies consultant after a long career in the industry that I'm sure we're going to get into. But welcome today, Ken, and thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Super happy to be here with you today.
We are definitely friends. I think we both admit to that, right?
Absolutely.
Do you remember how we met and then became friends?
I do. I think we were introduced by way of a mutual acquaintance, Shayna Rector-Bleecker, who's an industry associate of both of ours at Seven Generation Capital Corporation. And, Shayna knows there's 7.9 billion people in the world, and I think she knows just about everybody. So,
That's exactly right. I mean, we put in our newsletter, we were looking to expand and add some people, and she suggested you, and I was so lucky for that. I mean, I really appreciate what you bring to NACFE and the team, or me individually too. I don't know that I've mentioned it on the podcast, but I'm sure most everybody listening knows that I lost my wife to cancer in December, and Ken, in the 2 months that she fought it, and since, you've just been so kind with your comments. Both to she and me, and just that kind of support has been incredibly appreciated. But I knew through all of that we were going to have a deep friendship. So thanks for being you.
well, thanks, Mike. Those are very kind words, and I appreciate that. It's very nice of you to say that. Thank you.
I don't know that I've ever said this either, but initially the founders were wanting to call us the United States Council for Freight Efficiency, actually, and towards the last minute before we became incorporated and, applied for nonprofit status, we changed it to North America. And I remember asking, all right, well, what does North America mean? And one of the committee members that founded NACFE said, well, it definitely includes Canada and maybe Mexico and Latin America. So from day one, it was U.S. and Canada. We've tried to, support Canadian trucking and, the shippers and so forth in our work. And I think we've done a pretty good job of it over the 15 or 16 years. So welcome. And tell us a little bit about yourself. Where'd you grow up? What was your education and your career, and just what makes Ken North tick?
So I'm a Vancouver, Canada native. I was born here in Vancouver and had moved around Canada a little bit and traveled extensively throughout the U.S. and super happy to come to NACFE and bring a perspective to transportation that crosses both the north and the south border with the U.S. As we see so much of our freight and transportation and commerce activity moving across the continent, it's great to be up here in Canada and be able to share with NACFE what the Canadian experience is in that space. So far as myself, I've got a little bit of a different story on my education and career. I followed along in my dad's footsteps. My dad was in transportation pretty much his entire career, and I followed along with what he was doing, and then thought as a young person I'd go off and do something different. So I got my pilot's license and started on my training to be a commercial pilot. Early on in my mid-20s, I got a little bit of a curveball thrown at me. I woke up one morning and I had lost my eyesight. I had become blind. At the time, it was a form of arthritis, which I did not know I had, which had attacked my eyesight. Anyways, as a young person, it really threw a curveball into my life plan because I was no longer going to be a pilot. And, through the thankful therapies and surgeries from some very clever doctors, I got my eyesight back and continued on with life. But I needed to return to some kind of a career choice that would make sense. And for me, that it meant a bit of a pivot, meant to pick up where my dad left off and follow along in transportation, which I'm happy to say that I've done that now for the last 4 decades of my life and had a rewarding and great experience in transportation.
Wow. Well, piloting would have been in transportation, just a bit different form too. And so what did your dad do specifically?
He was the president of a large dealership network that was on both the Canada and the U.S. side of the border. And actually, funny thing with Dad, he was a people person. He's passed on now, but he was a people person, and he had made a commitment to all of his branches, all his dealership branches, to be on property at least once every year. And so as a kid, I remember bouncing around in the backseat of Dad's car as we drove around the province of BC and elsewhere, making all these visits to truck dealerships. It taught me a lot about the value of relationships with people, and really, in our industry, we kind of focus on this being a technology business, and certainly it's a business about making efficiency gains. But at its core, it's a business about relationships and people, and that's something that I've always tried to keep in focus throughout my entire career. I like to refer to the work that I do as living at the intersection of technology and human behavior. And that's where I find our industry the most interesting.
Yeah, I do too. So, real quickly back to your dad. I mean, your similar story to a prior or to a friend of mine who was a prior on the podcast a couple of months ago, Rob Swim. Rob spent almost 40 years at International Truck at many dealerships, and in the he was on the OEM side of the dealer OEM relationships, but Rob's dad had done a similar thing, and he had been a finance leader at International Truck or probably International Harvester when he was there. But they had a consecutive 60 years of work with the company, and really in that sort of dealership to OEM relationship. You were kind of on the other side of it, but similar friends of mine, both having a father they followed a bit. And Rob says the same thing. He remembers going and borrowing dealership pickup trucks to help buddies move in college and stuff like that. So
I don't know where this comes from, but since day one, I've always been fascinated by technology and gadgets and advancements in technology. And I think that's really why, probably at the age of 16, I started to fly, because it just allowed me to explore my curiosity through all of the technologies that were built into a Cessna 172 at the time. I'm still in the gadget business, still in the technology business, just do different things with my time, I guess.
I don't always find a truck dealer person as technology interested as you are. I got to say. So, over the last couple decades, what did you do, and how all that worked together?
This has never been a business of selling something to somebody. It's been a business for me, and the way I've approached it, of looking at what the best tools were available that were in industry, and then helping to put those in people's hands at the right time and in the right place. And so through my career, I started off, as I said earlier, following my dad's footsteps. Spent many, many years with PACCAR and the Kenworth organization. Then transitioned over to Daimler and worked with the Freightliner organization for a decade. Through that process, at one point in time, I was a part owner of a truck dealership, and then moved from there over to the Mac Volvo organization, which is where I spent my last 13 years, I guess, before retiring and joining NACFE. Through all of that, it's been, as you would know, there's been such a tremendous tectonic shift of available technologies available to people. It was always about trying to help people succeed in their businesses with these changes in technology and all the different cycles of emissions that we've gone through. One thing that I'm super proud of that we pioneered in the last few years was the approach where we were taking telematics systems on vehicles, and using the information that we could glean off of vehicles that were in operation over the road to predict when they would fail, when components on those vehicles might fail. And using that technology, using those telematics systems, we're able to give customers and fleets advance warning of an imminent failure, in some cases a week or two before the component would actually fail. And this was probably one of my most exciting moments in my career, where we found another way to really make a dent or a difference in the uptime profile of a vehicle. And at the end of the day, help keep trucks on the road and help keep fleets successful and profitable. It was a big shift when we could route a vehicle into a service or repair center prior to its failure, perform a quick repair, and get it back on the road before a more catastrophic and unexpected failure might occur, and take that vehicle out of service and create an emergency. So
It is so exciting how we've used technology for things like that. I mean, even think about like parts catalogs and stuff that was always, in our careers, it was all paper. It was all in huge amounts of 3-ring binders. And, now we can search for things and, that sounds like a little silly, I guess, when you think about where we are today, but then taking that data and using it to predictively repair and maintain before a failure. I mean, that's huge. I remember, it wasn't that many years ago where fleets would say, well, I've got 10% of my trucks sitting around as spares because I never know when my others are failing or would have downtime events. And we're not 100% uptime, but we are so much better than we used to be, and we can rely on these trucks and not have that waste of extra vehicles and all that downtime. And of course, drivers, what happens to them when their truck's down and they're not making money hauling? So that's a great story and an important recognition of where technology has really helped us.
we're working hard right now in the messy middle, helping fleets pioneer a pathway forward in transportation with new technologies. And one topic that probably doesn't get enough attention is just the way in which we all need to come together and support these technologies, beyond sort of a test pilot stage. It's super important not only that we get this stuff on the road, but that our industry is ready and prepared and able to support it and ensure that we don't have drivers sitting in hotels, while they've got long periods of downtime and so forth.
This is not about forcing the technology to work. It's figuring out where its best use is, taking advantage of that, figuring out where its shortcomings are, and can those shortcomings be mitigated and fixed or not? And it's okay if what we think is a good idea ends up failing. We don't want that because that's kind of wasted time. But the quicker we can have it fail or recognize that it's not good for a certain part of trucking and focus where it is good, that's where a lot of success is going to be, don't you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Well, I think, if you know NACFE and if you've known Ken before, you've listened to him here in these first 10 minutes, you realize wow, this is, I think, a pretty good match in NACFE and Ken North working together. What's, after 6 or 8 months, what's your take on joining NACFE and what are you most excited about that we're doing right now?
Well, that's a great question, Mike. And when I was outside of the world of NACFE, I would look at it from a distance and I always kind of thought, that's a pretty cool organization. They're doing some interesting stuff. And, now that I can kind of see the coin from the other side, I'm just even more impressed than I was before I really got to know NACFE at a deeper level. And really what impresses me so much is the quality of people that you have managed to bring together as part of this team. And I'm the first one to admit that I like hanging out with nerds. And I mean this is a compliment.
Yeah.
But some of the nerds that we have at NACFE are so smart. And you like yourself, have spent many years in the transportation industry, met some bright and brilliant people. But I can honestly say that the team that you've got behind the scenes at NACFE are some of the brightest minds I've ever worked with. And so it's such a pleasure to be part of this, and to be able to go on calls, Zoom meetings, etc., and not only share some thoughts, but be challenged on some ideas, and get such a well-rounded perspective on technology and where we're heading in the messy middle.
I appreciate that because I do think we have a group of people who they're just not done with their trucking careers, and whether it's somebody on the team that's 30 or 60 or 70, they for the most part every person that's been helping NACFE over the years, they're just not done with it. They're just not done with trucking. They want to give back in some ways, and they're just passionate. And then as we call it, you mentioned the messy middle, as we call it. I mean, nobody wants to be in a mess. And if you can think, I think everybody at NACFE, not just collectively, but individually, believe that they've got something to contribute to help clarify and clean up this mess, to be blunt and help navigate our way through it. So yeah, I'm proud of the team and not just about what we do together, but individually. One common theme in all of these podcasts is, people say they love the trucking industry or they love transportation or it's the people that we've worked with. My friends, they always talk about just like they couldn't leave the industry or wouldn't think of leaving it or how fun it is and everything. And I got a question for you because I think maybe you might have an insight on this. Is that is there something special about the trucking industry, or really would anybody, if I was asking people doing this, that, or the other, would they talk as admirably about their group or their section of the economy or their industry as we see in trucking? Or is there something in trucking that's a little different? How would you answer that?
Well, it's a great question, and this might be a 2-hour podcast if I really get rolling on this, so I'll try and keep it succinct. I'd like to go back a little bit on this and just sort of, consider that, our wealth in this planet, our global wealth is really tied to logistics and transportation. And if you look at countries or economic zones or areas where we have highly refined, very efficient logistics, we also typically find the countries with the greatest wealth. And so there's something connected about our survival and our prosperity to the efficiency of trucking and our ability to move goods effectively. And so, that's kind of the heartbeat of our economy and of our existence here in North America. And and then so you kind of say, okay, well, that's why we have to do this and do it well. And then I kind of, for me, in my last, I guess, couple of decades of this career, I've kind of just got this light bulb moment that's gone on and realized we've got a problem on our hands, and that it has kind of brings us all to this point where we realize the science of climate change is no longer in question, and that we have to make a correction on this for all of our survival, quite honestly, and we can't make a material correction on climate change without doing something to decarbonize transportation. So there you have the essential problem. We require efficiency in logistics and transportation for our economic survival. At the same time, we have to do things differently going forward to ensure our health and survival on this planet. It's kind of the ultimate paradox. And so I'm super proud to work in this industry. I'm super proud of the work that everyone has done to bring us to today, but also feel this burning sense of urgency to fix the problem that's in front of us, and do so effectively in such a way that it doesn't penalize us. It's a pragmatic industry. We have to find ways to do things with efficiency and at low cost.
Another podcast guest of mine said that, brought up diesel, right? So diesel is incredibly efficient fuel and engine for moving goods, and it's been that way for 100 years. And so, you can buy a $500 fuel tank and put diesel in it, depending on whether it's $1, $2, $4 a gallon, and haul freight. And it was a incredible fuel and engine power plant for a long time until, as my friend said, until it wasn't. We didn't realize, that this exhaust and these things, with NOx was causing the air pollution problems for human health, and now the carbon effects of climate control. So now we as an industry need to find another way, and that other way looks really complicated and hard and messy. But that's what our jobs are now.
Yeah, 100%. I'll just quote a past colleague of mine, Martin Lundstedt, if I could. He's the president of Volvo, but he put it this way recently. He said, "We've already climbed to the peak of the mountain of unrealistic expectations. And today we're past that. We're down in the valley of developing practical solutions." And I think that kind of resonates, that
Yeah.
example kind of resonates with me as to where we are and where we're headed.
What might be something you're kind of rooting for to figure out what might be successful?
I think most people will agree we will eventually use electrons to move our vehicles down the road, by whatever process that may be is still to be defined. Right now there's a number of different technologies that are on the horizon. And one of the things I think that is part of the unsolved equation, is it could take us quite a while to get to a level of vehicle refinement that is 100% pure and clean. So what do we do in the meantime? What do we do with the 4 million plus vehicles that are on the road right now, that could have a replacement cycle of a couple of decades? It's one thing to come up with a new mousetrap that is way out in the future, but how do we not burn up the next 20 years and not make a difference in the short term? So I think, all these technologies that are taking the traditional vehicles that are on the road right now and helping to make them more efficient with aerodynamics, and some of those other techniques that we've kind of maybe just almost forgotten about. I think that's important for us to return to that, to squeeze every possible mile out of the current fuel sources that we have right now.
I met Amory Lovins, the founder of Rocky Mountain Institute, now RMI, a couple decades ago. And what's fascinated me about his work is how he stayed true to energy efficiency. Just sometimes the boring stuff of, in his house, for instance, the water lines are like 2 inches or an inch. So you don't have all that friction of pumping against these small water lines in other homes. He doesn't have quick 90-degree bends in his water lines. They're these natural slow. And so if we move fuel with less diesel, we are decarbonizing, and we're creating less NOx, we're creating less carbon. And so there's that journey that NACFE's helped the industry on. I call it 6 to 8 to 10 mile per gallon on these trucks. That's so important, while we also look at the different fuels and so forth.
I often, in presentations and conversations, refer to the collective work that we do as saying that we are the pioneers. We are the pioneers in transportation, the first down the trail with some of the work that's being done to bring us to clean transportation. And so I'll pull that back to a personal level and just share a quick little story with you. About 400 years ago, a ship departed England called the Mayflower, and it sailed across the ocean. It took 66 days to get there with a little over 100 people on board. It arrived off the coast of what is now New England in 1620 in November. And there was a baby that was born on that ship in the harbor. And that baby, 8 generations back, was my grandfather, Peregrine White. He was the very first American. And so I kind of have a personal connection when I say we are the pioneers. It goes back through my family lineage, although, of course, I never met my grandfather 8 generations ago. I'm mindful of his survival in the new land and the tough work that had to be done to move this whole space forward.
I'm honored to meet a descendant of the first American. So thank you so much for being on, Ken. It's fun talking to you, and glad you're on the team. Take care.
It was fun. Bye for now.
Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends.